All right, and I also need to find the email. I just realized all my Datocracy things like had poor Alonzo on here, who's probably forgotten all about us anyway.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
we are live on YouTube. So, um, yeah, I screwed up the calendar. Tom may not have seen it. I sent him an email. He may or may not see it in time. That's unfortunate, but
I think he
anyway,
responded. He
he
said,
responded
see
to
you
email
tomorrow.
yesterday, like about
Mm.
the document, but I like because I forgot the calendar and the Zoom link, it may not have shown up in his calendar, and he may have, and the time zone shifted in Europe relative to ours. I don't know, and so I don't know what's going to happen if Tom's going to join us or not.
Okay.
Um, we may as well get started. Anyway, fantastic job on the homework. That's very exciting. Let me pull that up so we can see. And I think you were kind of um, going into that before the calls. So let's, yeah, let me go ahead and share the screen and share the document full screen and view to fit. There we go.
Mm.
All right, so the goal was to try and, okay, and actually, why don't you just walk through the document and I'll scroll down and we can kind of go from there. Take like 15 minutes to just kind of go through the whole thing.
Okay. So I started doing the aims down there, but before that, I'm like, well, because first I was being guided by some principles that I point to later. Second, I'm like, what do we have? I've been reading things, articles, and I've been seeing, through the years that there's technologies that can help us. And just recently, because of the Twitter uh, uh,
Mhm.
debacle, I learned that Twitter before Musk, they were working on ATP, these authenticated transfer protocol, which is being done by a separate entity that was being funded by Twitter, but I don't know what the deal is now. But it was supposed to decentralize social media so that it's like a little
I mean, were they trying to compete with Mastodon?
Mastodon type thing, but it's a protocol, right? So yeah, it's like Mastodon. And I don't think they have a product, but they have a protocol that is pretty um mature. Well, it's pretty advanced in its development, I think. So it is interesting. Like
Okay,
anybody
anyway,
can plug it.
that's a rat hole. Keep going through the document. We don't want to get stuck on the first
Yeah.
line.
Okay. So there's social media. There's if you get the IPFS, that's
Yep.
the sharing of the data situation. There's FreeBSD, that's like an operating system that is
I don't
open
ask you to
source.
go through all the technologies, but like these are all technologies that you see as representative of the new kind of world that you'd like to create and live in.
Oh, yes, that and or that we can use like
Mhm.
VirtualBox. We can use VirtualBox to simulate stuff and running in your desktop. So yeah, we can base the stuff that comes later on these things. Not all of them, right? And there may be others, but we have the technology. Like
Right.
the
So actually, this
environment.
word digitome is an interesting one. Did you coin that, or did you get? Do you remember where you got it from?
Both, I think I've heard it somewhere, but I looked, and is it trademarked? And I didn't see that it was trademarked, so I'm like, oh yeah, let's pick that. I have two words: the digitome, which
Mhm.
means the infrastructure, and
Mhm.
there's the datome, which is the data.
Oh,
So
interesting. I like
yeah,
that.
yeah, good. So we have this thing. So I'm thinking of the digitome. So
Mhm.
we need to build that. So if we go, we can scroll, keep scrolling down. We have,
Mhm.
I
Well,
came
I
up
think
with
the
some.
important thing is that so there's like when you're actually so digitome is sort of the thing you build, and then the
Mhm.
data is the data you collect on that platform as it's running, right?
Yes.
That's the datome, kind of like the genome and the proteome, I suppose.
Yeah,
Um,
I think datum. I think I took that name from some. some project that that deals with the human something.
Yeah,
But
the
it's
human genome originally, and then there's all
yeah.
these there's even a term omics, which is proteomics, genomics, epigenomics, etc.
Ah,
All these different omics. So this is
yeah,
sort of humanomics. Uh,
exactly. Yeah.
that's not a bad name. Anyway, and so, but then, and this is kind of as a preface to, and the principles are the things that help us build the digitome, which creates the datome.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool. That's actually a really interesting way of framing it, which is helpful because I was worried that that sometimes we get so caught up in abstract principles that we don't actually know what it is we're talking about, and so I think that's a really clear, or at least it definitely helps me understand where we're going. Okay, and then I think there's some practicalities here. I don't know if we can just spend time on the issues section, but
Yeah,
these
we
are
can
things
skip
I'm
that.
concerned about. Yeah. Anything you want to say here? Can we go on to AIM?
Oh, about the issues. Oh, oh yeah. Well, we have the data protection stuff like in Europe and California. So, do we need to adhere to those? And I was thinking, well, if we take this as these are just people relating to each other, people who are tech savvy and then they build their own technology, I don't think we have to meet
I
the
mean, the point is
GDPR.
that when you're small, you don't. If someone's actually running a data center in Europe and someone that you're sharing data with gets upset at you, you might, right?
Exactly. But and that's the thing. That's if to enter into humankind, you really have to like say, hey, I'm all in for it.
Well, yeah, but what if but I mean, precisely if they do that and then they change their mind,
yeah.
right? I mean, like we can't pretend that there will never be any problems. The short answer is it's not really a problem in the short term.
Yeah, it's not exactly.
Yeah. Anyway.
Um,
Anyway. There's
what
also
is
some things that can go wrong, but frankly, we are so far away from having the privilege of having anything go wrong. It's not really worth worrying about.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, I was thinking of nonprofits and taxation. So yeah, that's later.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is the meat. This is where the 10 aims
Right.
that
Could you talk a little bit about why you wanted to go with the term aims rather than ambitions?
oh yeah, because we have as we were discussing, okay, what is a goal, what is an objective? My idea of goal versus objective is totally opposite to what Thomas.
About time to find them.
So
Yes.
it's like, no, you need to get away from that. This is just like a pie in the sky. I say adjectives, like this is just things that are on my head. It's nothing. It not having to go to do with goals or objectives or because those terms
I
seem to
certainly
be
appreciate. Like, let's choose a word that nobody else is currently using. Let's write down what you think about, and let's worry about the mapping onto Tom's formal taxonomy later. I think that was a
yeah,
brilliant move. Good way to get
yeah.
unstuck.
I think when it comes to his taxonomy, he's like he says, just come up with a word. That's it. And then worry about the stuff later. I think this is the part where it's the word, and we'll worry about the stuff later. So I don't know if we want to list,
Well, let me just kind of like so you said just to kind of make sure I understand your context of this, which is interesting. So this is kind of these 10 here. You said just kind of digital component. Is that the digitome?
yes,
Okay.
that this, yeah,
Okay. It's just
this is what I would think could convert into requirements for the digital, for the yes,
right. So these are these are very concrete things that we can use to describe the system we are building, right?
correct.
Which doesn't have to be digital, but in this case, the implication is that it will be, right? These could all be true even of social systems, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and then you have the word dystopia as an aim is a bit confusing to me.
And that okay, those are the later ones, right? This is
Yeah.
evolution
So,
zero.
so can let me put a subheading in here just to make it really clear. Okay, so then these are sort of the, okay, you're right, the digitome aims here is the first subheading here, and then this section here. Okay, and then these are the
Evolution 0.
evolutionary aims. Okay.
Like I was thinking, we can have agendas, like what is it? Ethereum, they have the little uh, the little things that they call the big projects, the big milestones. So I was like, well, they just call these evolutions in this case.
By the way, is this supposed to be individuality, not individuality?
That's the word. That's a new word. So no, that's a new word. So it's like individuality and
identity.
Identity. So all, because I couldn't find, there's anonymous, right? I couldn't find a word that is the opposite of anonymous. It was, it talks around stuff, but there's no antonym to anonymous.
Personalized is probably the closest, but
yeah, but it doesn't capture what I'm talking
about. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, so I think are you okay with this subtitle of evolutionary aims?
Yeah, like it's after we build at least the first slab at a digitome, then we start to put, these are like, what are we going to do? First is what are we? What is this thing that we're building?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a computational thing that's guided by principle, blah, blah. And then with that, this is what we want to do.
Okay, but let me just make sure I understand your word, because you describe an aim as an idea worth pursuing, or
it's like
or just important concepts.
Yeah, because it could be a project, it could be a requirement, it could be a kind, we don't know what it is yet.
Right. Okay, but the thing that confuses me here is I can understand you want to increase, you're in favor of knowledge. You're in favor. Are you in favor of dystopia?
No. So I just wanted to have I used to have a longer name, which is what is dystopia? It's like dealing with dystopia. It's
like
anti-dystopia
or dystopia resistant or something.
It's like the dystopian environment. Like, so there's humankind, right? That we have to live in the world. The world has economics, have markets, and it has businesses that hide information. It has patents, all those things.
Right.
That's dystopia.
Right. So well, why is it listed here under an aim? That's why I'm confused.
It's like dealing with. It could be dealing with dystopia. I mean,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's just a little. I mean, I think it was probably clear to you, but it was a little confusing where the way it was.
Yeah. So in dealing with this topic, we can use the DAO. Right now we have, people have, that's the term of the hour DAO. So people seem to get around that idea, even though
it was the phrase of the hour. I don't know if anyone's that enthusiastic about it this month, but we'll see.
Well, crypto is one thing, but DAO is something else.
Well, yeah, with crypto imploding, I don't know if DAOs are as sexy of a term this week as they were last month. I still think they're good ideas, right?
Yeah,
but I don't know if they're words if that's a term to conjure with anymore. Anyway.
Yeah, because crypto is just like money. It's like, there's been people doing bad things forever. Made up the same thing.
Functionally, nothing has changed. When you say the word of the hour, that usually implies that, oh yes, this is what everyone's talking about because they're excited about it. And in terms of fad popularity, I don't know if that's going well right now. But I think the point here is an interesting one, right? Is that DAOs are a great role model of how to birth a new kind of culture inside of an existing environment.
Yes.
And act as a barrier interface. Okay, so I think that this is good that you have this here. And I think it's good if we can focus on the digitome aims as sort of a first pass, because I think these are closer to what Tom means by an ambition, and more amenable to the value engineering language sort of work.
Correct.
We're all sort of at the same level, kind of talking about the same thing, and everything else is in the other. Really, these are systemic. These are Actually, would you say these are systemic aims? Is that a?
Yeah, it's like a system. It's like, Ethereum has the EVM.
Mhm.
This is the Humankind EVM, for example. This is, is you have hardware. If you want to be part of it, you have, get your hardware together, and the software, and implement it, and then just connect. Just say, hey, I want to connect to Humankind. I'm doing, I have all the protocols, all the software that's needed, and we, as a society, will adhere to the principles, all that stuff. It's like a ceremony of, hey,
Right.
let's
So here's
become
a
part of.
couple of things. I'm going to use the word practic. This is my favorite Neil Stephenson word. Is like these are like specific things to do, right? Practices and
These
practical.
ones are practices, yes, on
Okay.
top of the first 10.
Right. And I think what's interesting about the systemic aims is that, one could make a case like, okay, you want to build the digitome this way, but if there's any legal documents or legal systems that are set up, they should also follow these same rules, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Aims
Yeah.
are more general than just the digitome. So I think they define the digitome, and that's right the way to think about it. That's why I'm calling them systemic aims. Is any system we build should have these attributes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what's interesting, so looking about this, I was thinking about trying to see if I can make this a little, let's see, smaller so I can see it all at one time. There's some interesting, I guess, groupings, for lack of a better term, that I want to kind of wrap my head around. Let me see if I can just as a way to just help me understand and think about this more clearly.
Mm.
Is I should be doing the control click, title to the right, title to the left. Failed. I can't click today for some reason. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right, there we go. So there's a few themes here. I guess let's pull it out that way, right? So one theme is, let's just call it decentralized innovation, right? And those, actually, that's interesting. Well, let's look at decentralized first. So things that are like federated, distributed,
Is resilient part of it.
resilient, I think, is that's definitely right. There's another things which are like call it democratic for now, right? Which is that it's
Open.
Yeah, let's go with that for now. So like it's open, programmable, transparent. And then let's go with trustworthy. Things that are, historical, secure. What does that leave? Wait, should these be bolded, or is that just?
Yeah, yeah. I think I didn't bold federated. Yeah.
Historical, programmable.
Flexible. Flexible is missing.
Flexible. There's Right. Another word that might be better is sort of maybe adaptive, because you have this idea of flexible and programmable. And they definitely reinforce each other.
So the system is decentralized, democratic, trustworthy, and adaptive.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any fewer words that'll get us the same thing, but anyway, it's not necessarily required, but it's useful for me to think, because certainly there is, like when you're designing, I think this is where it's interesting, right? Is that these are kind of usually any strategy you have. That was the point, I think, that, Tom would say, well, pick one of these and build a strategy that will optimize that. But in fact, anything that we do, like if you're going to build something that's in here, you probably want to do something that's going to hit all three of those at once, right?
Correct.
It's almost not worth doing if you're not doing. In fact, I would argue that like democratic and trustworthy, is very close to there, and decentralized and adaptive is also very, like, I can sort of see, I can build, like the first set, I can build a purely technical system, which is the, actually, this is interesting, right? These are sort of, like these are sort of, governance guarantees here in a sense, right? That will make sure that the system is open, transparent, accessible, historically, let me just make that more self-contained, historically reliable, right, and secure. It's like, this is what you want, like, regardless of how the system is built, like, if you don't have any of these things, then you shouldn't trust the system, right? Right, this is about almost like, worth using. And then there's a word that I'm going to play with, but these are more like these are the sort of system. These are its let me try this. Let me try this. It's not really proof, right? This is the architectural. Right, is that you could have something that has really good governance and a horrible architecture. Right, where like, and actually, this is, this is, this was the GNU Herd, which was the open monolith. You remember this before Linux?
Vaguely.
Richard Stallman, GNU, the Free Software Foundation, the GNU project. Richard Stallman said, we need to build an open operating system to defeat all the big guys. So he built a cathedral, which was the GNU Herd. He hired this brilliant guy to build this massive thing from scratch, like the perfect system that would solve everything, right? This is the poster child of that. That was the cathedral. The Cathedral of the Bazaar was not written complaining about proprietary software. It was written about complaining about Richard Stallman's, singular vision of trying to solve everybody's problem his way. Right. So this is the open cathedral, or this is the Libra Cathedral.
Okay.
Right. That was the GNU Herd. It was free. Everyone could use it, whatever, probably secure and all these things, but it was totally, monolithic. Right? Single point of failure. Right?
Well, now, in what sense?
In the sense that, like, it's a single point of design.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably a better way of putting it. Maybe that's the word. Is this? You can only innovate at the center. I think that's the interesting thing, right? So even if you have all these properties, if everyone's has an open, transparent, let's just, the best case of American, or let me split, like the Roman Empire could innovate, but only at the center.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It certainly wasn't having other properties. That was probably a bad example, but anyway, so the interesting thing here, so this is very much like but this is really an ecosystem, right? And actually, this is interesting. Okay, so actually, this is even better. So let me think through this, right? Make sure so example or counter examples, right? So the GNU Herd is this, the right governance, wrong architecture. Is this sort of, let's see, right? So the other extreme is is the what's a good example of an anarchic open source ecosystem without any sort of federalism. It's let's call it bulletin boards. Do you remember those?
Okay.
Yep, in the old days, the BBX, right?
Yeah,
so they were distributed, without decentralized, but not federated.
Not federated?
Like, so everyone would have their own random bulletin boards, and they could be incredibly toxic. There was no accountability. There was no consistency. People would just copy and paste random code everywhere. And there was no way to connect them together or to chain things or build stuff that work across them.
So they couldn't talk to each other? I couldn't?
You could, you would talk, each people would individually talk to individual bulletin boards, right? You could use the same software more or less to call it up, but there was no coordination.
Yeah, again, okay.
Right, there's no ability to coordinate.
Like no protocol. There was no.
There was only a client server. Right? It was client server, not peer to peer.
Okay.
I think that's interesting, right? So a client server thing can have that dynamic, but it doesn't create anything larger than the local thing, right? This is like the village, right? And this is like the empire, right? And the like the Greek city-states, or the Greek city-states were kind of the idea of this, in that, in most of the time they would just each do their own thing, but there was an external threat that all rallied together to fight the bigger bad guy.
But inside they had the aqueducts and all these.
But that was just Athens, and Athens conquered a bunch of people to make them and made the slaves of them to build the aqueducts. So there's an interesting place where that fits in here, but that's probably as good of, that and medieval Europe are probably the closest example of a decentralized system, which looks horribly primitive and crude from our perspective, but compared to the Roman Empire or the Chinese Empire, like there's a great example of the reason that the Chinese Empire didn't productize astronomy and gunpowder and all these and printing was that you could only innovate at the center. And if the emperor didn't think it was in his advantage to do it, he would kick you out. Whereas I think Copernicus got kicked out of like 3 different courts before he found a place where he could actually get funded to do his research. But because Catholic Europe was relatively decentralized, if you offended one powerful noble, you could find a rival of his to take up with. Whereas in China, there's just one guy. And if he doesn't like you, you're toast. And you can't do anything without him. There's no shared can't share edge. This is the what was it? Yeah, edges can't share innovation back. Because you can do everything you want on the edges, but you can't share it back. Versus you can only do stuff in the center. And so the idea is that the best ideas percolate inward and are reshared.
Yeah, it's like incestuous and, you know.
In a good way, yeah. Right. Now, what's interesting, and this is actually where the systemic aims are in tension with the practic aims, right? Because if we have this decentralized freedom, like, well, what if I want my age to be 21 or I want my age of alignment to be 19? Like, different nodes in the network can presumably make their own choices, right?
Oh, you mean they prioritize their own?
Right. Is the digital one central thing that everyone has to use the exact same version all the time? Or is in fact the whole point is that everyone can actually figure out how they want to do their own criteria? Right?
Well, to be useful, to be, because you know, I see it as federated, right? But I see like
What does
each
federated mean?
society,
Any locality can do its own
it's
digital.
more like localities, right? Or it could also be, you know, in the same locality, you could have, you know,
Multiple digitomes, yeah.
a society of teachers and a society of mechanics. They could be in the same locale, but they are different in their, you know, what they are doing, what they
Right.
are
And the
for.
question is that I think like the digitome, they have to agree on this is, you know, how we share data. This is how we're accountable. These are the metrics
Yes.
we care about. Whereas
Mhm.
they don't have to agree on all the practic aims of how they do that. I mean, they can share sort of like I said, like the like I said, you know, the specifics of how they do this, they don't have to do exactly this, right? They can have their own variations of some of these, right? Like obviously
Yeah.
513C3, that's an America thing. Right?
Oh yeah.
Doesn't
When
apply
it comes to
to
like, yeah, but and those are like, to me, those are like more like yeah, like a legal, if there's a legal section or grouping, then that will be it.
right.
Because
Okay,
that,
but yeah, but there's lots of, I mean, there's several things, right? Like
yeah,
I think the point is that in order to interact with the system, you have to observe these properties.
yes, the you have to
Right, right.
be
And
ruled
then,
by the datum.
right,
Yes.
in some sense, this is to stretch an analogy, like this is the bedrock, and then that people have to agree on so they can share physical space. But this is the religion, right? This is the ideals that you shoot for and some of the ways you embody it. And different people, you know, can have the same religion, but they practice it in different ways, right? You have the Methodist Church and the Baptist Church, who are sort of the same religion, but they
Mhm.
have different approaches for how what they say. Well, point 3 is way more important than point 8. No. Point 8 is the important one. Point 3 is mostly irrelevant, right? It's like
Mhm.
you can have those disagreements within the same religion, even if you have the same sort of high level orthodoxy. Like everyone
Yeah.
wants to keep kids safe, but like where do you draw the line and what does it mean? You know, all that, right? Okay. Yeah. All right. So anyway, so this interesting of you know, splitting this out in architecture and governance is an interesting. I mean, and it's not exactly it's not the only way to slice things, but I do find it useful to kind of have those two groupings.
Yeah,
Um,
I think a very, you know, if we are talking to engineers and people like that, then they will understand that. They're like, oh yeah, and, you know, that's how you are structured this, or, you know, or fairly educated people, you know, that know about federation and what that means, what is distributed, you know, and are familiar with how the internet works. That they know that, oh yeah, you down one server, no, this other server can take over. That's the foundation of the internet. So
right. Yeah, in fact, you
we can,
notice let's see, actually, let's try these in terms of the two buckets. This is what I would call an adaptive architecture. Like this is the architecture that allows you maximum ability to innovate.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
I would,
I was thinking, yes,
and this is
you're
what I
right.
would call inclusive governance. Like everyone gets to participate equally. And
Correct.
like if you don't have
Yeah.
these things, so that's an interesting uh, um, a way to think about what are the key attributes. And then these are, and then interestingly, you could kind of say like, okay, maybe these are the ambitions.
Just to adaptive architecture and inclusive
Inclusive
governance.
governance, and then these become things that you check, like how federated is
The
it?
strategies.
Well, no, I think these are actually the metrics or the value objectives. These are the things we measure. Because adaptive is a very, as Tom would like to say, bullshit word. Is how do you
Yeah,
measure it? And it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, these are the actual value objectives. Um, you know, and then these are the value objectives underneath it. Is like, okay, we can measure how federated something is. We can measure how distributed it is. We can measure, like these are straightforward to measure. I mean, not trivial, but straightforward, right? And this gives a way to, and this feels like you could language it easily. Like the ambition is to have an adaptive architecture, and then these are the value objectives that tell us whether we have that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next stage would be to see if we can come up with if I got his word right, is the scale, right? Is that like, it's not the value, it's not the goal, or it is not the numerical target we're going to hit, but this, at least the how the
like how many societies do you have? How many like major groups do you have? And
well, nothing numerical, but like decisions. Kind of going through that, right? Distributed is, the Gini coefficient. I guess inequality. Right, resilient is, that's an interesting question. This is a good look at your definition, see if we can think about.
What do you mean by inequality of power under?
The Gini coefficient means is basically sources of resource allocation, right? So
okay.
a purely egalitarian society where every node has the same power is, has a Gini coefficient of 1. But if somebody has more power, can do certain things that other groups can't, or if one person has all the resources and everyone else has nothing, that's a Gini coefficient of 0.
Okay.
And I don't think we're necessarily talking about resources, but I think we are talking about, let's see how do you say distributed, right? Is that, so it's a mesh network. Is that they are not dependent. Okay, so actually that's different. So this is, the percent interactions, percent of, purely peer-to-peer interactions. Right, if you're just interacting with peers and you don't need to call on some hierarchical source, that I think maybe is distributed. Resilient. This is let's call that the Nakamura coefficient. the number of nodes that have to be subverted to break it.
Okay.
Flexible. Is this composability?
Yeah, components can interrelate with other components freely as needed.
Mm-hmm.
They can form super components to tackle a particular.
Right. So is that really composable? Or
Well, that's something. That's like
that's one aspect of flexible.
yeah, like you can have bunch
Is
of
this really the
platoons.
technical side? Is this more about localities working, or is this about reusing architectural?
It's about anything. Like let's say we don't have markets, right? But we have needs. We have and we have to interact with, and this is the utopian dystopian dichotomy division. So we need to feed a whole bunch of people, right? We don't believe in money, but we still need to interact with people who believe in money. So that's where we need to adapt some dystopian principles to be able to get as many resources as we need. In that case, multiple nodes, let's call it nodes, multiple nodes that themselves can't amass so much monetary resources, whatever. They get together and they say, hey, we're gonna, we need to get together. There's an emergency. We need to.
So is this really about, so do you have an example other than individual nodes or components working together? Because if that's the only case, then I would go with composable rather than flexible. Or is this really just cooperative?
Yes, it's composed cooperative. Yeah, I guess it skews more cooperative. Like you can cooperate freely, and then you can cooperate as much or as little as you need to accomplish the task. But then all the components have to agree. Okay, yeah, this is important. So there's some sort of negotiation or discussion that say, hey, we need to get, like the example I put in there is like transporting a good from one place to another. The communities are like close together, so that they can kind of like, okay, I'll take you to from this point to this point, and I'll hand it over to this other community, and so
right. So here's the way I'd measure that. Then this is what they call the cost of coordination, right? If I have to like send a courier with an armed guard to talk to you versus dropping a letter in the mail, to be able to coordinate something, or if I can like coordinate using an open protocol or an open market versus having to sit down and one-on-one, expensively work everything out, or I have to go through a gatekeeper, that increases coordination cost. And if the idea is that, for a given transaction, thing that you want to accomplish, if it's really expensive to do the coordination, that's bad. But if it's really cheap because there's a lot of trust and because everyone knows each other and you've got a good system, then you have really low coordination costs in order to accomplish something relative to the value of the transaction.
Oh, so you're mixing in trust in there. I was just looking at it from the computation.
I'm not saying that you can, as an example, when you deal with human beings, you talk about trust. When you deal with computers, that trust is sort of implicitly in whatever protocols or coordination you're using. But the point is that it doesn't, the point is that when we say, why is cooperation hard? And the answer is, well, it's hard to discover. So sometimes cooperation is impossible because you don't even want the same thing, right? Okay, if that's a different scenario. The question is, okay, we actually do want this good thing. We all want it. It's in our best interest to coordinate and make it happen. But there's a cost of getting to that point of coordination. And that's what we mean by coordination costs. That's what makes it hard to cooperate, is in order to discover and agree and all the other mechanisms around there. That's what I mean, like the idea of, or maybe let's make it, coordination off cost, over coordination benefit, right? Is that sort of is a way to measure how cooperative a society is. If it's really easy, maybe it's just coordination cost. Maybe we'll just, you don't have to make a ratio there. is we measure the coordination cost, per value delivered.
Yeah, and at this level, I don't think I would mix in trust. At this level, I would just leave it as a system.
I don't want to use the word trust, but it's just like the idea is that like they say, hey, let's, me and my neighbors get together and build a barn. That's a coordination problem. And then there's a cost of having to do the coordination. And that was my point.
Okay.
And that's an interesting way to measure being cooperative, right? A cooperative group of people, it's really cheap and easy to coordinate things. Seems like a plausible definition.
Okay.
Well, you can think about it more, just because so programmable here. So is that the
is better than smart contract. It's even smarter than that. It's like
right, smart, right. So and the virtue here is that you don't want, like, the opposite of programmable is usually like off the shelf.
Yeah,
like,
ad hoc.
You get Microsoft, like the original version of Microsoft Word without basic, there's no automation, there's no abstraction.
No macros, yes.
There's no macros, yes. Right? So, so the percent of functionality that can be remixed. Remixed. Right? If it's kind of like the SPI versus API. There's things the system can do that the users can't.
Yeah, like you go to some department, in government, you have a whole bunch of people doing doing one thing 8 different ways. Because why? Oh, because we do it this way in here because of, I don't know, whatever reason.
Well, so, the good reasons or bad reasons, right?
Yeah, but it could be a company, it could be AT&T, it could be anything that is bureaucratic, that can't see, they don't want to, like, how do you call it? Well, it's like program, like superclass. Hey, you're repeating all this stuff in these functionalities. Why don't you create a superclass?
Okay,
that can...
right. Well, the worst place is where they're doing the exact same thing in a different way that's inefficient. And you want to say, like, you want to be able to share best practices and reuse functionality. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right, then. All right, we're cooking with gas. We got 7 minutes left. We'll bang this out here. So open. When you say the word open, how do we? Is it that we have
open source, open hardware, open knowledge? Everything is shareable.
The percent infrastructure. With source available.
No licensing fees.
Royalty free, yeah. Transparent.
We have the history, aka blockchain, that you can. But in this case, I mean, a human being can read it. Like these days to look at a blockchain, you need special tools and blah blah blah. No, the system itself is going to be very easy for anybody to understand. Is what it's doing, what it knows, all those things.
Okay, so this is the percent of the infrastructure. That is open. Accessible, meaning usable by.
That's like, it's like, for blind people, deaf people, all those things. We have to, like, keep them, engaged, and especially because
so yeah, with the I've been playing with the like divergent, like neurodivergent as opposed to neurotypical. They'll say non-typical. Um, I wonder if the word is historic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Storied?
Historic. Well, historic sounds more
Permanent?
like. Yeah, I like the history term, but historic means, oh, that's historic. What does that mean? That means that it's relevant because it was happened in the past and it was like so cool, like
Oh, it's almost like history or logged.
Log, yeah, log, something like that. History log, blockchain. Uh, it implies that everything is recorded and everything tracked. Yeah, recorded and accessible,
Well, accessible is elsewhere.
Yeah, well,
it's recorded, right?
Yeah, being able to be accessible in this term is in the term is like more like being blind. But
I think that I think the orthogonal virtue here really is this issue of a permanent historical record, right? Which is also a permanent historical record, right?
Yes, a permanent, yes.
Right. So recorded, but anyway, I'm not sure if historical or historic is a better adjective, but
yeah.
Anyway, the measure is that percent of actions that is permanently tracked. Printing structure that is, that is that.
And this is interesting right now because we have the blockchain, right? Well, a lot of projects are recording stuff in a blockchain, and I guess they will have to deal with GDPR too. How are they doing that?
Yes, I don't know if you can use a blockchain for any PII. So anything that is under GDPR, you can't like publish and share outside. Like you can't even record it really in a blockchain.
Yeah, but like I said, this is not business as usual. This is like just
but the point is that like but the point is that like well, the reason that people don't want, like for GDPR in particular, I think GDPR is different than the right to forget. But it's related. Like the point is that if people want to put a photo on the blockchain, it's in the blockchain all over the world. And maybe if you have a copy of the blockchain in Europe, someone could force you to yell at you and force you to erase it. But it's still on all the blockchains all over the world, right? Once it's in a blockchain,
exactly.
It's hard. Anyway.
And that's why no kids. Because, yeah.
18, but like I said, how do you decide?
I put 20 and over. I thought 18, but no, 20 is around there.
This is one of these things that's kind of arbitrary. It's like, okay, some people say,
well, no, not really, because the mind of a human people doesn't stop, like, evolving.
But how did you choose 18
like
versus 20 21?
Actually, it's 25.
Right. So like, so 20 is kind of arbitrary too, right? So
yeah, but it's not 18.
Ernest, there are some people who never grow up.
Well, yeah, but that's true, and I don't know how we can handle that other than as you can learn and you can I can't say practice because you won't have, maybe you have like Ethereum has like a try or a test.
As a rule of thumb, it's 18 or 21 or 20 or 25 is fine, but the reality is this is hard. This is freakishly hard. Like you can't just wave it and say it'll go away, because like, okay, when you have a small enough group of people, you get informed consent, people know what they've signed up for. The larger you get, the more people will sign up without realizing what they're doing, and they'll be surprised. and you have to figure out how you're going to deal with that. You can't just say only those people who fully understand the system are allowed to use it. That's just not realistic at scale.
Well, we can say that. Like,
you can say it,
we,
but like the reality is, at scale, there will be a lot of people on the margins where any rule you have, there'll be a bunch of people who could benefit from it, who are excluded, and a bunch of people who pass the nominal test who won't, right? It's this whole thing about false positives, false negatives. And you can't, you can try to avoid the problem or minimize the problem. You can try to minimize the problem. You can't really avoid the problem. You have to figure out how you're going to deal with it. And you can have some hard lines like, well, for things that are illegal in this jurisdiction or whatever, you have to be over 21. Like there's all these arbitrary rules depending on what you're talking about, right? And it's not an easy problem. It's not a bad, as a starting point, we'll make it like there's an age limit or whatever. Maybe there's a competency test. There's all sorts of different rules around this, and it's
plus if whoever invited you, if you misbehave, that person will lose reputation.
Right. So that is actually the idea of sponsorship is probably more robust. That I am responsible for these people, I vouch for them, and if they get into trouble, I'm accountable for it.
I found this on the web.
I actually like that one. The technical term for that is sort of feudalism, which you probably don't like either. But
I know, but
there's a certain sense of feudalism and collective responsibility, which is a really interesting design pattern. These are two things which have a very negative connotation in modernity. But in fact, they make for much more resilient systems in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about freedom, but yeah, that's great. But you can't have all the freedom. You can't just do whatever.
Right, because you have to have some, right, yeah, and this gets into Neil Stephenson and the decentralized republics. Anyway, this was good work. Let me paste these in here, I think. This is a...
You're going to put it in the document, or?
I think so, that way it's... let me put it in under here, maybe? Or where do you want? It's probably gonna.
Before before those ones.
Oops. Let's paste this.
Change that to normal text. Yeah, I think it's there. You go. Yeah, you know that.
So I overwrote something.
Like that line right there is a hit. Okay, there you go. I think now it's not.
Yeah, that was okay. And I think it's the one when we changed. Flexible, but... Okay. All right, so I think that's one layer deeper than we started, and I think that gives at least a starting point for Tom to react to. So I will send him the link, and we will see you in the new year.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, that was a wonderful Christmas present, Ernest. Thank you so much for writing that up. This was really helpful, and possibly the first session where we actually did the thing that we said we were going to do. So this is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. We applied language and yeah, came up with more concrete and understandable list. You know,
Yeah.
2 levels.
Yep. All right. Have a wonderful Christmas, and I'll see you in 2023. I moved it to the second week because usually the first week is bonkers,
Yeah.
and we'll see if that works on the schedule going forward.